guys, I'm Bethany and welcome back to my channel. I make faith and lifestyle content. I'm 23, I live in Alabama with my husband and our 2 dogs. And I'm so excited about today's video. I say that literally all the time, but it is a book video. And I haven't done one of these in a while. I usually only do like my monthly recaps, but today's video is gonna be a little different and it's gonna be my top 10 favorite romance books of all time. I'm so excited. I love books. I love talking about books. I love watching these videos. Like I love watching other people's book videos where they talk about their top favorite books. So obviously all of these books I gave 5 stars. Some of them I might have talked about before in recent book videos, but some of them I read in 2020 before I started my channel, so I might not have talked about them at all. So I'm very excited to talk about them in this video. I'm gonna give you a little summary of the book, what I thought about it, in the sense of how it made me feel, kind of the vibe of it, if it's more of like a rom-com or if it's more of like a heavy book. I actually only have one book that's an actual paper copy for this video. All the other ones I read on my Kindle. So I'll be just putting a little picture on the screen to show you the book. Let's get into it. I'm very excited. Also, let me know your top favorite romance books. I would love to hear them. So I'm sorry, the sun is coming in and out of the clouds, so the lighting is just not that great. Open this window a tad to kind of help with the lighting. So we are going to start with my favorite romance book of all time. This is my top favorite book literally ever. I'm pretty sure it's the first romance book I read in 2020, and there's just been no books that have been better than it, and it's Before We Were Strangers by Reid. Oh my goodness, this book is so good. You've probably heard people talk about it because it was very popular on Instagram and things like that. It's not really a popular book talk book, and I feel like it's not talked about much now, but then it was talked about so much, and it's literally so good. Basically, the premise of the story is this guy named Matt lives in New York City, and one day he is just hanging out next to the train and sees his long lost girlfriend from college getting on the train. She looks around, they like make eye contact, she says his name, and then he can't catch her. He can't stop thinking about her, so he puts a Craigslist ad kind of explaining where he saw her and things like that. And then it flashes back to what happened with them in college. Probably half of the book is just what happened to them in college, and then it goes forward back to the present and tells you what happens. So it's a second chance romance, and you'll probably be able to tell in this video, second chance romances are my favorite. I love them so much. It's just so fun. So sweet to see people like reconnect, like have a second chance. There's definitely a plot twist close to the end of this book that you do not see coming. It was not heavy, but you definitely feel things. Like if you want a romance book that's gonna make you feel things, this is what you need to read. Like if you were just trying to get into the romance book world, this is the book you need to read. It's so good. And you'll probably have a hard time finding a book that's as good as this one. The rest of these books that I'm going to share, I love and I think are so good. They got 5 stars. But this one just like will forever be in my heart because it's so good. I actually read it twice. I read it in 2020 in like March, maybe May, I don't remember. And then I literally read it again that same year. I cannot stop talking about this book because I love it so much. And I feel like it's not talked about enough. And it's literally my top favorite romance book of all time. Any of these books, if you're choosing one, you need to read this one. Also, a few of these books, I literally stayed up till like 2 or 3 in the morning finishing them. This book being one of them, I literally stayed up so late to finish this book. I'm gonna shut up about it. It was just so good. The next book is November 9 by Colleen Hoover. I don't know if it's November 9 or November 9th. It definitely just says November 9 on the title, but I also read this one literally in one sitting. So basically it's about this girl named Fallon. She's about to make a cross-country move from LA, I think to New York, and she meets this guy named Ben who's an aspiring novelist, and she spends her last day in LA with him. They hit it off, and Fallon becomes Ben's inspiration for a novel he wants to write, and basically they decide that they want to meet up every year on November 9th and not talk any other time during the year, but they just meet up on November 9th, and you just kind of see what happens. There's definitely plot twists in this book. I feel like a lot of Colleen Hoover's books have plot twists, so this one definitely has a plot twist, and it's kind of insane. You're not anticipating it. More on the heavier side, I feel like Before We Were Strangers just literally gets you in your feels, and this one is kind of heavier. There's kind of heavier topics. I just thought it was such a good book. Literally flew through it. Next is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I love this book, clearly. This is my favorite book from Christina Lauren by far. I love Twice in a Blue Moon. I feel like that's an honorary mention because I did love that one too. But basically it's a second chance romance. As I said, I love second chance romances. They're literally my favorite. So basically this girl named Macy is planning her wedding, and she's also working as a new pediatrics resident when she runs into her boyfriend from high school, Elliot. and basically something happened the last night that they were with each other, and it kind of builds up to telling you what happens, which obviously caused them to not talk anymore because they hadn't talked to each other since that night. And it's been a while since I've read this book, but I'm pretty sure it flashes back from like what happened in the high school times and what happened now. So many people talk about this book as one of their favorite romance books, and I think it's so good. And I've read a lot of Christina Lauren's books, and I feel like this one is like really gets you in your feels, and all the other ones are more kind of like rom-com-y. This one's definitely not rom-com-y, and I loved it so much. It was so good. Definitely a plot twist at the end. You're not expecting it. Little heavier topics, but highly recommended. The next one is Bright Side by Kim Holden, and this one is actually in a series. There's a couple other books after this one about different characters from the first book. I did read all 3 of them, and this one is my favorite, but trigger warning, this one is a little heavy. It's very sad. I don't want to give too much away, but you're probably going to be sad at the end of this book, so if you don't want to be sad, I wouldn't read it. So basically it's about this girl named Kate, and her best friend Gus calls her Bright Side because she's just gone through a bunch of like kind of tragic things in her life, but she's always optimistic, so he calls her Bright Side. And she moves for college and meets this guy named Keller, and she's trying to steer clear of him and not fall for him because she has the secret. I loved it so much. It really got me in my feels. Such a good book. If you want a romance book that's gonna make you cry, this is the book you need to read. And I do recommend the other books in the series, especially the second one, because I feel like you kind of get more of the story of what happens after this book. Obviously I really like those, but this one was my favorite. So good. I don't hear many people talk about this one either. The next one is actually a series, and I had to put all 3 of these books in here because obviously it's a series and they're just so good, and that is the Friend Zone series. I just finished reading them in January, and I actually talked about them in my January reading recap, and I loved them so much. I actually have the 3rd book in the series. This is the only paper copy of this entire video. So basically the first book is about Kristen. She's helping her friend get married, and she meets the best man, and they kind of like, you know, like have some feelings, but Kristen was told she can't have children, and Josh, the best man, wants a big family. So it just kind of takes you along through that story. The second book, The Happy Ever After playlist, I'm not going to tell you what it's about because it will ruin things that happened in the first book. The 3rd book is mostly about Vanessa, who is a YouTuber, and she's also just tasked with watching her niece, literally having to take care of her niece. Her sister just dropped off her niece. She's taking care of her, and her next door neighbor is Adrian, who is Josh's brother, and you just kind of see what happens. I love these books so much. I definitely think they are more rom-com-y than Colleen Hoover or Love in Other Words, but I do think they touch on heavier topics. Obviously, as you can hear from the first book, talks about infertility. The second one talks more about grief, and the 3rd one talks about a illness. I can't remember the illness. So it kind of touches on heavier topics, but keeps it lighthearted, and that's what I really love about these books. I thought all 3 of them were so good. I highly recommend you read all 3 of them in order, because I did not read them in order, but highly recommend them. I love them. More rom-com-y if that's your vibe right now. The next one I've definitely not heard many things about, and it's Much Ado About You by Samantha Young. I don't know if I would call this a rom-com, but the title makes you think it's a rom-com. So basically this girl named Evie, I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm pretty sure it's Evie. She lives in Chicago, and basically she has passed up for a promotion at her job, and so she decides to take a little holiday to a little English cottage and works at this bookstore called Much Ado About Books. And she's just, you know, taking a little hiatus, not wanting a relationship or anything like that, working at this bookstore, getting to know these villagers, and she meets this guy, Rowan, and you just kind of see what happens. I thought it was such a cute book, and I just love books that are set in England, or little cottages in England, villages in England. I think they're so fun to read. So I loved this book so much. It's definitely not rom-com-y, but it's definitely not like a Colleen Hoover heavy. If you want a romance and you don't want to cry, you want to feel good, but you also want to get in your feels a little bit, this one is for you. Highly recommend it. Loved it so much. The next one is Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. I actually finished this in one night. Literally stayed up till like 3 a.m. finishing this one because it's so good and you just want to know what happens. It's about a mom and a daughter, and the husband slash dad is in a tragic accident, and it just kind of goes through that experience. So my camera ran out of storage, but we're back. So Regretting You, I definitely think it's a book where you're just not really sure what's gonna happen. Definitely on the heavier side, and it touches on grief and things like that. So more heavy, but I feel like if you're reading a Colleen Hoover book, you know it's gonna be a little heavy. But I thought it was so good. Highly, highly recommend. The next one is another one by Colleen Hoover, and that is Reminders of Him. I loved this book so much. It just came out in January and I just loved it. So basically it's about this girl named Kenna. She just got out of prison for a tragic accident that happened when she was in high school, and she goes back to the town where it all happened, and you just kind of see what happens from there. I just loved it. I thought it was such a beautiful story of forgiveness, of reconciliation, and I definitely think it wasn't as heavy as some of Colleen Hoover's other books. I just loved it. I thought it was just a beautiful story. The next one is One True Loves by Jenkins Reid. This one is a whirlwind. So basically it's about this girl named Emma, and she marries her high school sweetheart Jessie. In her 20s, they travel the world together, make a life together, and then one day Jessie is on a plane over the Pacific Ocean and goes missing. The plane goes missing. And a couple years go by, she doesn't hear from him. She thinks that he passed in the accident or a plane crash or something like that. And so she moves on. She is engaged to a new guy, and then she gets a phone call from her husband saying he's alive and he's coming home. It's kind of this premise. You obviously find that at the beginning of the book, so I'm not giving anything away. But it's definitely a whirlwind. It makes you feel things like really hardcore, but it's also pretty heavy, obviously. It was just a wild story. Definitely like an unrealistic premise of a book, but I really loved it. You just really don't know what's gonna happen, who she's gonna choose. I just definitely think that you should read it. It's so good. We are finally on the last book. I've been talking so much, but the last book is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I just finished this one in February, maybe? I can't remember, pretty recently, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. So it's about this girl named January. Her dad has just passed away, and she goes to live in his beach house for the summer to write a book because she's a writer. And the next door neighbor of this beach house is Augustus, and he is also a writer, and she actually went to college with him. They decide that they are going to swap genres. So basically, January is going to write like a action adventure book, and Gus is going to write a romance book. And you just kind of see how it plays out. I love this book so much because you really kind of hear like January's kind of how she goes through her grief, how she goes through just things that happen in her life, but you also see what happens with Gus. And I just loved the storytelling. I thought it was so good. And I feel like it was more than a romance and different than a lot of other romances where they just like get together, a conflict happens, and they get back together. I feel like this was definitely different than that, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. I feel like it's talked about a lot. I think it's definitely a popular TikTok book. So those are my top 10 favorite romance books of all time. If you're looking for a new romance book to read, you should read one of these because they are so good. If you're interested in more book videos, I actually have a book playlist with all the book videos that I've done in the past, and I also share like summaries, reviews, and things like that on my Instagram stories. If you're interested in that, you can follow me there. But I hope you enjoyed this video, this long chat about my top favorite romance books. I had so much fun talking about them. I love romance. It's definitely my favorite genre of books besides like Christian books. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe. I would love for you to stick around and join the fam over here. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok, post fun stuff over there. But I think that's it. So I'll see you very soon for my next video. Bye.